Welcome, everybody. I'm Matt Williamson. This is Pop Goes the 60s, and I have a very special guest today. You know her. She's an actress, singer, businesswoman, and author of Earth to Moon, a memoir, Miss Moon Unit Zappa. Welcome, Moon.
Hi, thanks for having me, Matt.
Oh, no problem. I've been waiting for this book to come out, and I found it very inspirational. And I think it'll appeal not only to Frank Zappa fans, but to also fans of the 60s and 70s, because you detail the life of a normal child being brought up by, I guess, what I would call abnormal parents.
Well, I would say they were normal to themselves, and they were following their own paths. I think probably what makes me different right out of the bat, right out of the gate, is that that I called my parents by their first names, fresh out of the oven. So Frank and Gail, which probably that already sets up a strange dynamic if you're calling your parents by their first names from the time you're very small, because then you kind of don't have that chance to be a kid, really. You're treated like a peer that has no power.
Hmm, okay. Well, what I like about the book so much is that it's engaging and you write it with humility and humor. So there's a lot of heavy topics in here, but that humor and humility you kind of smooth it out a little bit and kind of makes fun of the ridiculousness of some of your upbringing, which, it's entertaining and it's kind of sad at the same time.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people come up to me and have anger on my behalf, and they want to give me a hug. And it's interesting because I just grew up putting one foot in front of the other, like we all do, and so that reflection from people who are enjoying the book and connecting with the material, it's given me another opportunity to see myself in another light. And so I have been yeah, that's just been a very interesting part of the process. And going back to what you said about humor and humility, I am the daughter of both of my parents. My father had a great mind and a great sense of humor, and Gail, I definitely inherited her tenacity and her, I guess, bigger spiritual vision. This was, again, a house where we had a family Ouija board. I don't know if my father even realized that.
Mm. Well, I was left scratching my head in several areas of the book, particularly how your father engaged with you, or maybe didn't engage with you, but more so your mother's manipulation and ultimate betrayal. And that was really not what I really expected. But overall, I find a lot of your story. It's beautifully sad, but also encouraging. So what I wanted to do with the listeners here, the viewers, is to kind of take them through some of the book because you tell it as a chronological story of your life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, I didn't view I mean, I tried to write it like a police report, and to not label anybody or any of the circumstances, and just try to, if you ever read The Little Prince, where you're just looking at things the way you're receiving them. So in terms of Gail being manipulative or whatever, those are labels that I didn't put in the book because I thought that she had her reactions to her circumstances, and then those reactions had consequences. Like I just tried to be very neutral about everything, and when I was looking at everybody, and and then the events, I think, speak for themselves.
Yeah, I guess neutral is a good way to put it. I guess you didn't challenge their authority a whole lot, and I guess neutral is the way you were expected to be.
Well, I think that I was expected to be somebody who helped be collaborative in terms of my father's art being the most important thing that was happening. And that's just, I've described it in some other interviews as Pharaoh syndrome, where all the arrows pointed to the top of the pyramid, and that was my father, and that ultimately was for me not a sustainable model of existence, because it was a patriarchy within a larger patriarchy. And some people have said that my book is a portrait of toxic femininity and what happens when you just make somebody else more important than yourself. And that that repetitive conditioning, it's I'm kind of showing some of the effects of that, and in some ways, I'm escaping the cult of fame and show business, and so uh, again I try to just look at it like what happens, where are you susceptible when you don't have a voice and support from the get-go, even though publicly we're seen as this close family. In practice and in reality, I was having a very different experience than even say my siblings. So the boys in the house had a different experience than the girls in the house, and that's just I think when I got really specific with events, then I think that's what makes it universal, because everybody has some version of things that went well or things that didn't go well in their upbringing. And I think that there is a lot of crossover, not just for people in the 60s and 70s, but really for anybody who wants to look at family dynamics in an unusual way.
Yeah, so your dad's work and his music was the top priority in the family. And if I look at other bands, say the Beatles, the Beatles was a bigger, more important thing than their individual lives were. That's for certain. But and you try to just feed that bigger thing. But in your case, it emanated from inside the family, which was very strange. And you became like almost an employee of the family business.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to know more about other people that have family businesses, because it definitely spilled over literally onto the dining room table. And so uh, there were certain times in my father's career where when we changed over to being in uh, cottage industry, then we were living in boxes and bubble wrap, and that's not exactly the most fun furniture a person can have. It's not relaxing to be in that kind of a setting.
Let's talk about that setting a little bit because you started when you moved to Los Angeles area when you were very little. You started in the log cabin, which was in Laurel Canyon, and that was already kind of the beginning of somewhat of a chaotic surroundings before you moved to the ranch. So, can you give us a little background of the place you lived in, actually?
I mean, I had no memory of that space, only a sense of, as you described, the chaos, uh, just many people around. And in researching the book and looking at photos that I found, I found it really interesting because as an adult, I still am drawn to those kinds of aesthetics. And so I thought that was kind of just fun for me to look at. But in terms of who was around, I mean, obviously I was a baby, and something else about working on this book, I had always thought it was Gail's story to tell because she was the adult opposite my father. She knew all the references. She was the person that had chosen this life for herself, and kids don't have a say in that, and so that's my belief as a parent. But Gail's belief was that we chose her as a parent, so that already is a strange thing to wrap your head around. And then now you're in the epicenter of the music industry, and with all this incredible um uh just just your fingers on the pulse. You're just, your neighbor is making something amazing, and the guy across the street's making something amazing, and you're just in this environment of artists that are really talking about the times. And that's always exciting when you have your peers around and you can have that back and forth conversation. They were doing it with music and with art, with fashion, with whatever they were in in communication with.
Yeah, and once you guys moved to the ranch and your dad, you had the studio in the basement, that really became the headquarters. And as a remodeler myself, I was always curious. You lived in constant remodeling and add additions to the house. But what I wanted to ask you was, how stable was your dad's studio? It continued to also grow, I assume. And was that built up when he was on the road, or did Gail, was she in charge of that? Who put the license plates on the wall, that kind of stuff.
I mean, so when we moved into the that house, it was a two-bedroom house, and Gail uh, she just had a vision with environment the way my father had in his music. There was limitless imagination for my father musically and limitless imagination for Gail environmentally. So she was just creating worlds within the home. So uh, it was an ongoing process. So I think by the time I left the house, there were probably, I want to say like 6 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, 3 laundry rooms. Ahmed had a fireman's pole to get down to his shower. There was, I mean, Gail had this stairwell built that had all the images from ESP training cards uh, built into the ironwork there. And so there was just whimsy. And I used to say that the house was Mediterranean because it was like Tudor, Mediterranean, all these different elements. There was stucco, there were tiles, there was um, carpet, there was submarine doors. It was just, she was just always looking for new ways to, I guess, make it more and more magical. And so we were always the destination house because there was just so much artistry and aliveness everywhere you would look. Visually, it was just so pleasing,
Now,
chaotic, but pleasing.
was that artistry for her sake, or was it for the kids at all? I mean, you mentioned the pole in Dweezil's room, that was for him, but what did you get that was
Uh,
special? What was
I
your
mean,
fireman's
well,
pole?
so one of the things that she had I got to do was I got to design a stained glass window that I still have that door with those images that I drew when I was 8. And so that was really a fun thing to do. But yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, Gail really was a buried artist who might have done many wonderful things if she'd given herself that permission. There just really wasn't. My dad's career took up the space.
Yeah, and I guess your dad was obviously a pioneer because he they ran the business pretty much as they could so they wouldn't get screwed by the record companies. So he had the vision to know enough not to get screwed in that way. But
Well, that's because he got screwed. He learned the hard way. He got screwed, and so he was like, I don't want to have that again. So
okay. And then Gail really took it upon herself. I think do you think it was like a protection or a support or because it didn't last throughout his life that way, but at the time what was her motivation?
oh, she was well, I mean, I can't know what was in her mind. I from the outside, from the inside, but still on the outside, it seemed to me that Gail just tried to make herself indispensable to matter to Frank. I mean, it's really difficult to be opposite someone who you had the feeling that um you were again just a cog in a bigger machine, and his message was so much greater than our individual messages. But was that true? I don't know. We didn't have a chance to develop our own we didn't take turns with like, now you do your amazing thing and you do your amazing thing. So we didn't have that kind of a setup. But I think that what I observed as a daughter was that Gail was opposite somebody who cheated so frequently that she had to find a place where she mattered in a way that was um, that she could affirm for herself and that enabled her to still stay in that relationship. So I think becoming the manager and the being in charge of the liner notes and the artwork and overseeing everything that fed her and made her feel like she could stay invested in everything that was happening without, looking at the stuff that she couldn't change.
Well, I think that her attention to that, I mean, she didn't really in turn give you guys the attention I guess you needed because I think running theme of the book is how you weren't taken care of very well. And I found that to be very interesting in the book. And my favorite story in the book is your zoo trip in the early 70s with the family. Would you care to tell that a little bit?
Well, you tell me what you liked about it. What do you remember about it?
Well, the way you told it was that this was a very rare occurrence that the four of you, and this is Dweezil, he was little, very little, you went on an outing publicly to the zoo, and your family had adopted an animal of some kind there. I forget
An
what it was.
echidna.
Echidna, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And so you, for some reason, I guess you were going to go visit this adopted animal that was residing at the zoo.
Our animal sibling. Yep.
Yes. So the story, as I understood it, was that you were very excited to be there and have a full day there. But really, the day got cut short, and your parents weren't really excited to be led around by a docent. You were very excited. And once your dad needed to have a cigarette, he had to leave and go to the entrance. And prior to that, the docent wanted to take a family photo of you guys, and your parents kind of put him off and said no. So then when you go meet your father at the front of the zoo, everybody's getting this picture taken with your dad. And you're like, why can't I have my picture with my dad? And so that I thought was very sad. I thought that was a very interesting thing. And because your dad didn't strike me as somebody he didn't really seek fame in that way. But for whatever reason, I don't know why he didn't give it to the family, but would give it to a stranger.
I mean, I think that he probably separated business and his private life. And in his private life, he didn't want to do the stuff that he was doing in his business. I mean, that's how I had to think about it. I don't think he was trying to do it on purpose. I just think it's not enjoyable to constantly be having your photo taken, and it's part of your the work that you do, but I don't think he was trying to yeah, have that in his private life. Yeah, we really didn't. I mean, I joke and I say if I want to look at family photos, I log on to Getty Images and then I have to purchase a photo to and that's what I did do. I had to purchase some photos for the memoir. The Steve Shapiro estate, they donated the images, but I mean, it's I get it, I didn't get to use some photos because the price was too great for my book budget, but
Well, that same zoo trip, your dad did give you something very special. So maybe he
Mhm.
knew that he had to do a little something and gave you a little zoo souvenir from the coin making machine.
Yeah.
Good luck on one side and Moon Unit is beautiful on the other.
Yeah.
So is that something you still have?
Oh yeah, I have that. Yeah, I probably will post a photo of it on Instagram one of these days. Little by little, I just keep trying to, I don't know, just either show a better image of some of the things that are in the book, because I don't think the images came through very clearly in the book. But yeah, I think it's probably fun for uh, the people that love the book to see some of those little images. I know a lot of people went back and listened to or watched the Letterman interview and watched the Howard Stern interview, so they could kind of see for themselves what I was writing about.
Some of the reproductions in the book, some of your letters or drawings, those are priceless. Actually, they really help tell the story. So
Mhm.
that is to see those in better quality would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to your first question about normal, I mean, I just don't think it is normal for children to be drawing bondage imagery. I don't think that that's, and I don't remember if I saw that actually, or if that's just the feeling of the house. I don't know, but I was drawing quite advanced uh, sexual situations and just saying the word cock like it was any other word, just it was just normal language in the house. So uh, that's different.
Well, yeah, that seemed to be around the house all the time. So you were totally exposed to that. And it was just normal for Frank and Gail to allow that. I mean, that would never have flown in my house at all. I mean, it was, so I can see that to me is abnormal. But
Well, and the thing is if my father traveled to Europe quite a lot, and there it's normal for families to be naked in hot springs and bathhouses, and nudity is seen very, very differently there. And so I think he adopted some of those more cosmopolitan views, and I think the idea was to have no shame about anything you could think about or anything that you could do or explore. I think that was ultimately the idea there, but it was it didn't feel safe. It was, I think that was the premise, but it didn't feel safe to explore it. Like I certainly never got the stranger danger conversation, and there were certainly a lot of people around that I definitely thought they are a danger. So
You had some kind of innate ability to kind of read some of that, even though it was presented to you as, I guess, normal. So that's
I think
interesting.
a lot of kids of celebrities especially have that very highly attuned spidey sense of people's intentions. But maybe it's an ability in everybody, and they just don't really let themselves know the truth. I don't know. But it is nice when you can be like, am I seeing this wrong? I feel like that person, blah, 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 whatever the circumstances. You want that checks and balances kind of feedback. But yeah, you know who does a brilliant job of that is Jenny, I can't think of her last name right now. Roseanne's daughter. She did an amazing, she wrote an amazing memoir. I think it's called This Will Be Funny Someday. And and she really does an amazing job about talking about being in that fame machine and what that's like.
I grew up in the Midwest and it was so different, but it seems like kids do, no matter where they're from, they understand boundaries and I think they want boundaries. So it sounded like you kind of wanted some boundaries within your household that weren't presented to you. And that's what maybe made it somewhat seem chaotic to you.
Sorry, can you ask me that again in another way? You said you grew up in a place that you didn't have that experience?
Yeah, so in my, I had more of a strict upbringing, a more conservative upbringing, and the boundaries presented to me, I kind of understood. And I think generally children want boundaries because that's kind of the antithesis to the chaos. So that's kind of how I was reading your situation. I don't know if that's accurate.
Well, um, Jenny Pentland. It's called This Will Be Funny Later. This Will Be Funny Later. Jenny Pentland memoir. Um, I think that it's I always think about how a pilot flies an airplane in a straight line by adjusting a little to the left and a little to the right, and that's how you get there. So y maybe more boundaries would have done the trick, but I mean, there's so many variables to consider. I think about that scientific experiment where they have a baby monkey and they have a wire monkey with food and a terry cloth monkey when they're removed from the care of their mothers. And invariably, they choose comfort of the terry cloth monkey over the wire monkey where food's an option. So that instinct to feel comforted is greater than say a need for a boundary. The instinct to have that just to feel um, mirrored, seen. I think that those are, I mean, all these ingredients are vital, but absent almost all of them, then you do become some weird experiment to yourself. I mean, there's a reason why solitary confinement is something in a prison system that is to keep someone in line. And so if you're left in in space with way too many choices, then and no landing points, then yeah, it's hard to stay in reality. It is.
And one of the things that I found interesting is that initially when you turned in your first draft of this book, you didn't mention anything about Valley Girl. I thought that
Yeah, that was a surprise to me as well as to my publishers.
is that intentional or you just didn't?
No, 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 no. I just didn't. I wasn't even. I don't know. I just had a total blind spot on that period of my life. I think I was just focused on trying to get as much information about my father in the story, and then that for I didn't realize until later that that was a much bigger deal than I let myself really understand. And that again, that's the weird part of writing and memoir in particular is what you discover about yourself that you can only find out by the process of going through it. And so I I again I was living my life just putting one foot in front of the other to get through things, and then going back over how complicated that was to be publicly one way in the family, and then privately a third way. So to keep all of uh, those uh, juggling those things and keeping them all in the air, that was difficult, especially to be 14 and trying to do that, trying to manage all those things. And I'm speaking in vague terms because I don't want to spoil anything for the reader about that time, because I think part of the fun of the book is the reader is going to come to it with some expectations or some projections or some ideas, and the reality of some of the stuff might be very different than they imagined, and so I think that it's there. I don't want to spoil that part of the process for the reader, but also I think that was something I really wanted to play with, because it's projection. To even notice when you are in projection is something that I think is really fascinating. And some people don't really have the chance to really get a clear picture of where they're doing it and how they're doing it. And once you catch yourself doing it in one area, then you can catch yourself doing it in all these other areas. You know what I mean? So, for example, if you're trying to uh, really be honest with yourself, for example, you'll start to notice all the ways in which you jump off a hot spot. Maybe you distract yourself with media. Maybe you know, go shopping. Maybe you, whatever, just whatever the thing is that makes you not stay with the original feeling. It's once you catch yourself in avoidance once, then you can kind of get a sense of all the other ways in which you do it. So I was also trying to get the reader up to speed on how, yeah, that they could try on how I think and how I feel and how I love. And so that was another really exciting part of the process. Because when I read something or listen to something, I get to climb into that artist's mind and that artist's world. And I think that one of the things I love about books and dance and film is that I believe we only have one life here. And so then you have the chance to live many other lives through the things that you consume.
Well, the way you wrote that allowed the reader to climb into your life very easily, and that was one of the benefits of the book, and how I read it twice already because it was a
Oh, thank you.
very nice read, and just it just moves really well. And we'll leave the Valley Girl story for a lot of the readers, but suffice to say, I was really surprised at some of the aftermath of it. Obviously, it was your father's only hit, and you really had a very big part in the creation of it. But then, the afterward, the publicizing of it, like you talked about your public persona of this one big happy family, but you were really called upon to do a lot of work, and you on your own pushed that single quite a bit. So I was really surprised to read that. And you didn't really get much credit for it inside the family.
I really didn't. And again, I mean, as an adult, someone who's been in therapy, someone who's done a ton of yoga, someone who's uh, paid attention to how other people are doing it, and becoming a parent myself, I mean, I really think you can't give what you don't give to yourself. It's just not possible. And even on the most basic level, if you do a favor for someone and then they don't do a favor back, you might feel resentment. But if you really give to yourself as well, then you're going to have an easier time letting that generosity go and not expecting something in return. That's like on the most basic level, an example of this dynamic. And now if you expand it in a much greater version of that, I think because we all gave so much to Frank, I think all of us felt like we were entitled to something in return, because there was no thank you for our contribution. And that is, I think, pretty common in a patriarchy, and pretty common in situations where somebody is just not attuned, or they're selfish, or they have some, they're on the spectrum in some way. They're missing the social cue to remember to say thank you, or whatever the thing is. There's it whatever were the reasons there, at the end of the day, it's I think we all, Gail especially, felt that we wanted to have something tangible to say, I see that, I recognize that your participation mattered. It moved some piece of this forward. I couldn't have done it without you, unless you really think you could have done it without somebody, you know?
Well, not only were you not thanked, and this is Gail I'm talking about here, but she diminished your contribution. So that is even worse, I thought. And not only that, but after all was said and done, and you kind of launched from a Midwestern's point of view your Hollywood career off of this. She came back around when she needed money from you, and just took it basically. And it was really an amazing, I don't know what you would call it, an amazing show of not only ingratitude, but somebody who just took and didn't give.
Well, again, I think that she was in a survival mode of her own, or there was some diagnosis there that never happened. And again, I watch a lot of documentaries about cults, because um, I just didn't know there was another way. I wasn't exposed to there could be another way until I became a parent myself. And then I got angry all over again about a lot of these situations, because it's so easy to say, "Oh, this isn't about you," or to say sorry, or to say, "Now let's focus on you," or "Here's some soup when you're sick," or some of these basic things that are just unthinkable. I mean, one of the most damaging things was Gail saying that improvisation isn't writing. And but I don't know another way to write except to make things up and pretend I'm the character, and then that's how you write dialogue. Do you know what I mean? So to 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 then also just like throw a wrench into even the process of creativity, it was really, really damaging. And I talked to a lot of writer friends about the process of writing, because I'm thinking about writing fiction next, and I've heard a rumor that you feel free when writing fiction. And I was asking them, how do you feel free? And they were like, well, what do you mean? But what I realized is they don't have the writers that I chatted with, they don't have a famous parent. They don't have another artist in the family. They literally, it is freedom, because they don't have, there's nothing that they're comparing it to. It's just built in that they have the permission to play. And I think that um, I was never bored, but I was always on hyper vigilant, high alert. So I'm always envious of people that they had a boring, stable childhood, because when you have that foundation, you can daydream, you can go into fantasy, uh, yeah, I don't just dream stuff up, appreciate things, maybe even a little bit more in some ways. Yeah, I think that it's, I know they say artists have to suffer, but I don't really think that that's true. I think you need to have the safety that you can go in any direction creatively. I think that that is an essential ingredient in making things.
And she said writing is an improvisation. Coming from the wife of Frank Zappa, that's a very odd thing to say. A little ironic, I would say, to use that against you. But yeah,
Right.
she well, as she kind of became, I would, she seemed like a stage mother as well, as you started to launch your career and started to become a little bit more independent. And the fun thing about the book for somebody who's our age is all the people you rub shoulders with through the 80s, which is a lot of fun. And it was just through your Hollywood career, really. But
The difference with a stage mother is a stage mother wants you to keep working so that you are providing for the family at higher and higher levels. So Gail was this like reverse stage mother, where she's like bossy as hell in the contract process, where she's creating all this what looks like protection to the other side, but or obstacles, but always at the same time sending the message the world isn't safe, you're not good enough, and on and on. So it was like to be put in the position to have to battle for somebody to be cheerleading for you or to publicly present to someone cheerleading and then privately they're not. I was more like a Ike and Tina Turner model.
Yeah, it did always look like you had this kind of family that was very tight. And your dad, I remember him saying in an interview, and I loved watching your father's interviews. And I watch his interviews really more than I'm a music fan of his. But he talked about, well, he said, I have no friends, but my family are my friends. So I mean, I thought that was kind of interesting after reading your book. He guess he really had no friends.
Yeah, I mean, they said it. They had employees. And but even if they wanted to have friends, there really wasn't, our lives weren't set up like that. I mean, Frank was really working 70 to 90-hour work weeks. And when he got sick, he was sad that he could only work 40 hours a week. But again, I think that Gail probably took stuff out on me. This is my guess, um, because it's the way she felt about herself. And if she had felt that she was an equal to my father, maybe she would have been like, "We're all equal to one another." I don't know, but there was just that dynamic. It was just so clear. Frank had so much to say. I mean, it's hard to even get mad about what I didn't get because you look at the body of work and you're like, where was he going to squeeze the time in? He had to steward and protect this giant talent that he just was gifted, and he was just, I mean, that's a wild ride. Nobody picks their nobody's going to choose the that path. They're just given that weird path.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Now you said he worked 70 to 90 hours in his prime.
Yeah.
You think, I mean, for the artist, what was rendered out of it? I mean, do you personally think it was
100 albums in 25 years, right?
a lot? And do you
And
think it's
that
still
doesn't
worth
even
it?
include the stuff that's in the vault.
I mean, that's prolific, but from his family standpoint, it's hardly worth it. I mean,
From my perspective, yeah, from my perspective as a
and
parent.
okay, and for me, I mean, I'm not a quantity is over quality. I mean, you wonder how much of that could have been cut out. I mean, generally speaking, artists don't just keep cranking it out. I mean, usually, but and your dad he just loved to work, I guess. It was his life. Everything
Well,
else,
I think that's where he got his dopamine hit. It's more fun to have people clapping than to be making a peanut butter sandwich, you know?
yes. So how often was he on the road? I mean, what
In a
percent?
touring year, it could be 7 to 9 months.
Hmm.
And then at home, he was working all night and sleeping during the day. So we'd always have to get, well, I would always have to get reused to him being around. And then he always made you feel like you were so special. His attention was so you just craved it so much.
Now he started getting sick in was it the late 80s maybe?
Yeah, he was 48 when he was diagnosed.
Okay, and then he died in 93, I believe. Is that right?
Hmm.
Okay.
At 52, yes.
So things changed quite a bit when he got ill. And you mentioned his work level dropped, but I found it interesting in the book how Gail responded to him, and it's if I call it, it seemed like she got revenge on him because of all the infidelities or whatever it was that she didn't quite treat him as well as she used to because he couldn't demand it. I guess he was weak.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was my read on it. Any minor delay in being there for him just to me felt loaded and connected to a past injury. I mean, if you're not keeping current with your resentments, like whatever, I have a yoga teacher and her whole thing is she has a 24-hour rule. And if you feel like you're shutting down to somebody that you really care about, you have the conversation, you have the uncomfortable conversation right away. You say, I feel like there's some tension here that I want to look at, and I'm feeling like nervous around you and resistant. Like you clear that resentment right away. And if they say, no, there's no problem, then there's nothing you can do about it. You can't do somebody else's work. And I, I don't think that uh they were working that way. But even I do think if even if Gail had said something, my father was such a take me as I am person, take it or leave it. I'm doing this anyway. That you do the math on it and you're like, what's the point of even opening my mouth, you know?
I thought he would have maybe stood up more for himself, but I guess maybe he was in no position to do that after all those years of, basically running things and Gail doting on him. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know if if things he'd been avoiding feeling caught up with him, or I don't know.
Well,
He
those are
didn't.
some, yeah, those are some of the things the reader wonders, and
Yeah.
it's left a lot of questions. It's like, and
Yeah.
through the book, we're pulling for you, Moon, totally pulling for you, but and then as the continues, the chaos doesn't really subside after your father passes. There are some things change in the business. Gail is now running the business, and your father had some wishes that were uh, not really taken into account that you didn't find out so much later. And this is where I remember this was somewhat public than when Gail died, because I felt like, what's going on here? That's very strange because you and Dweezil were really not given equal share of your father's, estate and really making decisions. I thought that was very odd at the time.
Yeah, she said we could never have anything to do with the intellectual property, never have a say in how Frank's legacy moved forward. And it wasn't the unequal distribution of stuff that was upsetting. It was that she basically permanently said your contribution the whole time meant nothing, and that I don't wish either one of you well forever the way I wish the other two. Like to have your final wish for somebody to be, um, as a parent, it's unthinkable. I spend all of my time making sure my kid is set up well, that my kid can survive, that my kid can thrive, and that if if I can contribute to uh, creating that kind of stability forever, of course I'm going to do every single thing in my power to make sure that's in play. I can't even imagine just saying yes, these two move forward and these two do not. But that's for whatever reason, that's how she did it.
Now, have your siblings read your book?
Ahmed has read it, and he really liked it. And that was my hope that they would read it and then they would I mean, I'm curious about their experiences. I wanted us to write a family memoir because I just thought it'd be so interesting to look at the same situation from four different points of view. And when Gail was alive, I thought we should do it from five different points of view. And I had never seen anything like that. And I just thought it would just be so interesting because we could all then get to know each other more and see each other and go, oh wow, that must have been really hard for you. Or oh, I had no idea about that, or whatever. I think to love someone is to be known and seen and heard and accepted and loved for warts and all, and to extend that to the person that you care about. It's just that's to me, it's like such a basic thing that it's unimaginable any other formula. It's just an unimaginable thing, but here we have it.
And your book kind of seems like volume one. I would read volumes two, three, and four if they ever were to come out. And, so maybe that will happen at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it as an invitation to say, here's some things I struggled with. Tell me about you. Tell me about what you liked and didn't like. I mean, I'm glad when people tell me they had a wonderful experience opposite Gail. Gail did a lot of wonderful things for people. So did my father. They're things that were life-changing that made such a huge difference. And I hope that we all as human beings can help where we can help, and where we feel closed down, that we can examine that, or whatever, just get as far as we can go. I don't know, it just seems wasteful to not surpass your potential, your potential as a human being. It just seems wasteful.
Now, I've got a question that really wasn't addressed in the book, but I'm just curious about it, and that is what is your relationship with your father's fans?
Well, it depends on the fan, right? I mean, some of them, it's like we belong to a secret club and they know the secret handshake. And then there's that shorthand of jokes and laughter and a lot of the time the fans know the music a million times better than I do. They know the recordings better. They know the names of the songs. They know the lyrics because they discovered it and they took it in a different way. To me, it was my embarrassing dad talking about stuff that was embarrassing. But for them, they're like, wow, this person equals freedom. And so for me, that might have been the band Pavement or the band Bon Iver or whatever, like whoever, Kate Bush, Sinead O'Connor, Björk, these people, and Fiona Apple. My mind is blown when I think about her creativity. And so I have to translate and just say, oh, they feel a way about my father the way I feel about Fiona Apple, for example, you know? And so I can meet them at that place. And a lot of times they tell me an amazing story about um the the way in which he made a difference for them. And that is always heartening because just on the most basic level, I just think, well, he wasn't here for me, but I'd love to hear how that mattered for somebody else and made a difference elsewhere because not that it justifies it, but it makes me feel like, okay, I can accept it. I mean, for a while there, I was really kind of interested in meeting all the women or some of the women that my dad had, you know, one can say chose over us. But what's probably more true is that wherever he was, he just played around with whatever was in front of him. This is before cell phones and texting. And so, and he was on a budget and he wasn't calling home and he was lonely or he wanted a hug or he wanted whatever, it's so for a while there, I think I wanted to meet those women just to see, well, what did he pick instead of Gail or instead of us? You know what I mean?
Did you meet any of them?
I did connect to a couple of them, yeah. And then very quickly I realized, oh, even if I ask all the questions I have, in a lot of cases they didn't want to share because I could see that they didn't want to shrink the experience down to for me to consume. You know what I mean? They wanted to keep it for themselves and then they can stay it could be their private world forever.
That's really interesting. Wow. Well, Moon, that's fascinating stuff. I could talk to you for another hour about what's in the book, but I think we'll let people read for themselves. And like I said, they'll come away with all kinds of different questions and interpretations, I suppose. But it seems like everybody's pulling for you. You know, it's that's I felt good reading it because of that, because you seem like a winner at the end of the book.
Thank you. I mean, when Gail did what she did, where she basically said, you can't know Frank in death either. You didn't get him in life, and now you don't get him in death. That and to have that human experience of somebody's final word being so unpleasant, I had to literally get bigger than death and say, okay, well, that was her. That's and I could have been a cautionary tale about ending up in a gutter because it's so heartbreaking, or I can say, no, love gets to win, and the best of you gets to win, and the best of Frank gets to win, and that's what I'm going to move forward, and that's a choice, and that's a muscle, and that's just how I choose to be. I want to have my kid feel proud of me, and I want to feel proud of me. I want to represent in the world what I'd like to see in the world. You know what I mean? So if I'm gonna do it, and I think I we really do. If we don't see examples of another way to do things, we just settle for what's in front of us, and so we need that mirror neuron thing where we see somebody doing something. Um, bravely, and then you think, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. And so I read one review that said, it said they loved the book, and there was something like, you also can read how you wouldn't want to be Frank Zappa's daughter. And it really made me laugh. It really made me laugh. And a lot of people have come up to me and said, I used to want to be you. Now I don't. And I just I'm like, good. If you are nicer to your kids and you love yourself a little bit more, then hooray, hooray, hooray.
Well, the fascinating thing about your father is that, even though he was very absent for you in many ways, I still really like the guy. I would have loved to have met him.
Great.
Humor and all that still comes out in your book. And I thought that was a wonderful thing too. And the rest of your family, even Gail has a couple high spots, a few less, but you know, there was a lot of good that came out of that, and it's still a fascinating story, and I'm glad you were able to tell it. And that is this book here, Earth to Moon, a memoir. And I even like the graphics on this too.
I
This is
love the graphics. They really nailed it. It's just beautiful.
And people can get this at moonunit.com. And I have one other question. Are you able to use the Zappa name in promoting any of your products at all? Can you use the name Zappa? Because I
I
know,
mean, I use my whole name.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody would really do anything about it now because I don't think that they would want to have that negative press. And I really do think Universal's doing an amazing job of satisfying the fans, and I've had some wonderful meetings over there and talked to them about some collaborations that could happen in the future. And so I mean, Gail is not going to stop me or Dweezil from helping new fans get hatched and help the dedicated fans that are already here keep enjoying the music and in new and fresh ways, or seeing who he was. He was a really important figure in so many areas, and so. I think when people grow the mustache, I think it's a shorthand for themselves to be like, I'm going to be true to myself. There is something that's very, if I could grow it, I would probably have
I don't think I can do that with the soul patch. I could
it.
not very well anyway. Well, it seems like all four of you have great respect for his legacy. So that, I mean, I got that out of the book too. And
Yeah.
siblings write books. They should. I hope they do. I hope to read them sometime. So
Yeah, that'd be great.
So again, moonunit.com, check it out. And also you'll find your line of teas there as well. I didn't get a chance to mention that. So you've got not only the talent of writing, but you have your own tea line as well.
Yeah, I have a tea company, and so I made a tea that's I have a totally Assam tea that was to honor the 40th anniversary of Valley Girl, and I have a Earth to Moon tea, Earth to Moon unit tea, and that is so you can smell a book and I can taste a book and drink a book. But yeah, I love my tea company. I'm super excited about it, and yeah, if you or anybody else wants to tell me what they love about the tea or the book, or they have questions, there's a little thing they can sign up and write me a little note, and I eventually get to everybody.
Well, very good. I will put that link down below too, so people can check out not only the book, but the tea as well.
Yeah, thank you. And they can also follow me on Instagram.
Right. Well,
I am Moon Unit Zappa.
there you go. Well, Moon, I wish we had a little more time today, but let's break here. And I thank you so much for joining me. I think my viewers are going to love your book and love this video. So,
Thank you so much, Matt, and we'll stay in touch and we'll connect. Are you in LA?
no, I'm in Milwaukee.
Oh, in Milwaukee. Okay.
Today was
All right. Well,
2 degrees.
all right. Well, one of these days we'll meet up on one coast or another, or in the middle of the country.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you so much. And again, I'm sending you big love for the grief that has its a shape of its own. It just has a timing of its own and a shape of its own. So, and that's another piece about the book is grief literacy. That phrase comes from Mirabai Starr, but just how to be in a conversation about big feelings and how they grab you when you least expect it. And that's also part of the story.
Very true. And yeah, as when I was reading your book for the second time, I was with my wife, so at a time that really hit me in a different way when you asked your father when he was ill, do you want some Dilaudid? I know all about that. So yeah,
Mm.
it's really a new phase, and you have to learn how to go about life a little bit differently. But so
Yeah, and walking someone all the way to the end is what's better than that, you know? Being there till the end is a gift.
very much so.
Yeah.
Well, we'll end on that note. And again, I thank you again, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. You too.